It's almost like an earthquake. You just get bombarded and just sirens, all grounds are shaking, buildings are shaking, people are screaming, crying. There's definitely a smell of grenades and debris, I guess, that stayed with me. You're going somewhere that you don't know the language, the culture, you don't know where you're really going. You just know you're packing and you're going somewhere in hopes for a better life, but nobody can guarantee you that. Without somebody opening doors for you, I wouldn't be here where I am.
I was investing in a guy that was going to make a difference. And so where I'm excited, that investment's paid off in you.
You know, I'm in this profession of trying to help out the community, so I don't know if this is the way of me saying thank you to him and his whole family by repaying back to the community. But I knew I wanted somehow to tell him thank you, more than just words, for everything that he has done for me. I was born in the city of Doboj, which is in northern part of Bosnia. Once I was 4 years old, the war started in Bosnia. It started the early 90s and lasted till 95, 96. So during that period of time, from age of 4 till 7, 8 or so, basically it was just chaotic, trying to survive.
Well, we have to take this in a historical context. And of course, history is something that always follows us, that always makes an impact on our identity. In the former Yugoslavia, you had the downfall or the destruction of the centralized government, and then you had regional actors take control. And so you saw a lot of militias, you saw a lot of people who wanted to be separatists, but the big issue is a lot of these people were actually neighbors, right? And so in what is now Bosnia, there were a lot of people who were ethnic Serbs, there were a lot of people who were ethnic Croats, and so you had all these small groups really trying to gain independence, trying to assert themselves, and there were other groups who claimed that they were defending themselves. And so what happened is that just violence really took over.
No war is pretty, especially when you're a child. You don't know really what's going on, what the causes are. You just know that, that people are dying. You don't have much food, water, everything is really basic needs are scarce.
I think for children, it would be tremendously traumatizing. And so all of a sudden, you see your parents' stress level go through the roof. You hear about family and friends dying. You might even see a parent disappear or get killed. You're not going to school anymore. The friends that you had, you're no longer allowed to play with them, or they could be, a source of threat. And so this was something that really shook your foundations. And so you would go from having a normal life to living with tons of uncertainty. And you see it affect your parents and how they behave. Just things like going out, going to the park, going to get food, going to school, all of those things would change overnight. So it just leaves so much uncertainty. And some of these children themselves really, were involved or were victims of violence. And so it would have been a very terrible experience.
I was in Bosnia until 2001. So during that 5-6 year span after the war, I really can't complain. It was great. It was just a bunch of fun times, just playing outside and with kids going to school. Well, once the war ended, even today, the country, it's not going, I feel like, in the best direction. So that's whenever we decided to apply for the United States. So my parents wanted a better future for me and my brother, and they were willing to sacrifice everything that they have done so far in their life in Bosnia and just start all over.
There are people who may have left by bus, there may have been people left by car, and there may have been people who left on foot. And so a lot of that is accompanied by things like hunger, by staying in refugee camps for months or for years, for uncertainty, with what's going to happen with your family back at home, uncertainty about what's going to happen to you in the future, what your future is going to hold, where you're going to build a new life. So not only materially has everything changed, but also psychologically there's tons of uncertainty about, the safety and future of you and your family.
Once I found out that I was coming to the United States, then obviously it's another sad moment in my life that now I have to leave all the friends and family and then come to a different continent and start everything all over. I think it was February of 2001 when we arrived in Houston, Texas. I remember it was just a large city. Everything was just flat. It was just almost like something in your dreams out of fantasy world. It was just something totally different that you never seen before. Basically, the place where they placed us in that apartment complex, it wasn't really the best place. It was a lot of violence going on, gunshots, stabbings, gangsters on the corners, so I feel like if I was to stay there, it's almost like you would have to be part of them in order to have somewhat of a normal life, because if you were not, you were going to get bullied, every time you would have came across them. So my parents were very worried about the faith that's going to come up for me and my brother if we ended up staying there. So they decided to either, we're going to go somewhere and find a better place for me and my brother, or we're going to go back to Bosnia, because they just didn't want us to end up on the streets. So my mom had a cousin and dad had a friend here as well. So somehow they got in touch with them to see where they were located, and they both were here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So they reached out to them and asked questions, how is Bowling Green? And they pretty much said, it reminds them a lot of Bosnia just because there's so much wooded areas and it's not all flat like Houston, and the climate is somewhat similar to Bosnia. So my parents decided we have nothing really to lose at this point. We already made a choice. We're not going to end up staying here. So we ended up on a Greyhound bus and we got dropped off at Louisville Road. We had a friend that picked us up. As soon as I saw it, I liked it. It seemed like more welcoming environment. So once I started Moss Middle School here, there were already some Bosnians, so I started talking to them and started playing soccer. So everybody was very welcoming. English, it was almost like being deaf. You really can't, they're speaking to you, but you can't really tell what's going on. It was just a very weird process. Where they want to talk to you, they want to tell you something, but you really don't understand. It seems like out of nowhere, I was sitting in class and I started understanding the language. I couldn't really speak it, but I could understand what was going on. It was just like it happened overnight. That's what it seemed like to me. Well, Jack, he's always been a very humble guy, down to earth, willing to help. So, I would say probably we bonded more in classes than on football field. Football was obviously after school, but we had several classes together as well. I remember him actually in English. We had the English class together, and he's the one that helped me out quite a bit. I feel like if somebody is willing to take their time out of their life and help me out, I just appreciate that so much that I never wanted, to let that go, and I always want to be nice to a guy that helped me during the times that, I needed some help in English courses.
Having class with him, he was kind of, I guess you'd say disruptive, not in a bad way, but I never got in trouble for fights or, any kind of stuff like that, but he was just disruptive, and it was funny because kind of wanted to cut up and be the class clown, but it was also funny because he'd always get caught because of the accent and stuff. So he couldn't really hide the fact that it was him disrupting class.
I don't know, I felt like I was just a very wild kid. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I was very, I don't know if you want to say mischievous, but somewhat of, I guess, troublemaker. And I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't know if I was craving attention or if it was just something that I was just growing up. I really don't know. I feel like sports kind of kept me in check. I mean, if we were in classroom, I always wanted to be a class clown. If somebody dare me do something, I'll be first one like, let's do it. So that kind of stuff like that, nothing too crazy, but obviously probably not the teacher's favorite kid.
Junior year comes, I always knew Vedad initially as a soccer player. And all of a sudden he comes out when we're juniors and decides to give football a try. And by that time he had put on some weight and stuff, but he had never played. He had no idea kind of what he was doing, when he was out there. He's like, I just want to come out here and just be physical and hit people.
So the first time I was somewhat getting introduced is by playing, I think it was 2004 Madden. I just had people like Jack and some other guys said, hey, why don't you come and try out for football? You can be your kicker. It was totally different sport that I had no knowledge of. I was learning quite a bit. I had so many people that were trying to help me out. I was a scrawny 170-pound soccer player or so, and then trying to play defensive line. It was just a totally different transition, different sport.
With Vedad playing defensive line, I played linebacker, so we didn't spend the entire practice together, the whole 2 hours, but it was a majority of it. We would spend the entire day with Steve Ayers, and with Steve, we would just sit there, and Steve just wanted us to hit, and we would just go through tackling drills for, 30 minutes to an hour.
Well, I've been coaching for quite some time, and so, I had the privilege of coaching at Warren Central. So I meet this young man, and his name is Vedad. And Vedad wants to start playing football, and he was a sizable kid. Obviously, though, and where Vedad's from, there in Bosnia, American football, that style of football is not played. So Vedad is having to learn this game. And so he comes in with a few other Bosnian students, and they begin to learn the game of football.
Whenever I started playing football, I met Steve. Once I figured out that I'm going to be playing defensive line, he ended up being the coach for defensive line. I say till now, he's the best hype man there is.
There's three things Vedad did really well. First of all, he listened. Secondly, he asked questions constantly. And then the third thing that Vedad was willing to do, he was willing to try different things.
I was always kind of curious, hey, what does Christianity say about this? And then he would ask me about what does Islam say about this? So we would just before practices or after practices or something, it would just, we would just ask those questions and we would exchange those stories.
This is a story that he carries in his life. I told you the second thing that Vedad did really well, he asked a lot of questions. Well, he was with the right guy if he wanted to ask questions, because I wanted to coach him to how he could be successful. He was always blown away. I would take a lot of the kids home. I'd take Vedad home. If he needed to go somewhere, we would arrange that. And he would always ask me after he got in college, he goes, you didn't have to do that. And I said, Vedad. I said, I wasn't giving you nothing. I said, I was investing in a guy that was going to make a difference. And so where I'm excited, that investment's paid off in you. And so Vedad, he fulfilled the mission of our coaching. The game of football will teach you great things in life, and he grabbed that. He ends up going to Campbellsville University. Football assists him on that. It's not about the football. Vedad learned some things that he carries today. He's passionate. I said, this is on Vedad. He responded.
I would see these football players just, muscular. I was like, man, I always like, that's impressive. Like, I want to look like that. And I always had a dream to play college sport. So the coaches were like, just eat right, lift hard, and then you will look like them. For me, it's more mental than physical. Now I look back into it and all the trauma that I endured during my childhood, weightlifting kind of helps me express it, but it's just something that's always been in me ever since I touched the weights. It's just something that stuck with me, and I just love it. There were some smaller schools recruiting me just because I played 2 years of high school. I ended up picking Campbellsville University just because it was closer to home. Whenever I got there, everything was new. I was so excited. Obviously, it's a Christian university, a lot of devout, faithful Christians there. My whole family's, they're Muslims, and my mom is a very devout Muslim. Growing up, she always, taught us how to pray. But when you're a teenager, you kind of get distracted. So me being there as a Muslim, I observed how faithful Christians are there. So that's what kind of triggered me, be like, well, why can't I be more faithful to my religion when seeing these other guys that are doing the same thing on their religion?
One of the things that I've always appreciated about Dad is, Vedad and I shared stories. I would share stories what it was like for me to be his age in South Central Kentucky. He would share stories a little bit about, what's it like to come from a war zone. I would ask him about his traditions. What happens in Ramadan? What do we do here? When do we do? And we learned from each other. So we respected each other's story, and we learned from each other's story.
I knew he was a preacher, but I still looked up to him, the way he carried himself, the way he talked to people, how he helped. He was helping me out, and I was giving him as much respect as I could and learning everything that he had to offer me at the time. It's hard whenever you get prejudged, and even today, I still run across people that would make some very rude comments about people of Islamic faith or Muslims, and they really don't get to know a person. And then also being in law enforcement, that people tend to prejudge you based off of your faith, your name, or just your profession that you happen to be in. Well, when I was a freshman there, I was kind of uncertain on what field I was going to take, so I decided to take one of the gen eds, which were in criminal justice. I liked it, what they had to offer, and it seemed to be fun. I think that was at the time when I decided might as well be in law enforcement. So once I graduated from Campbellsville, I was already in process with applying with different law enforcement agencies, but it was just taking time. So I ended up applying here at the Warren County Regional Jail. And I stayed there for a year. I remember I was just getting out of the gym and receiving a 502 number from Louisville Metro, and they called me and asked me if I would be willing to come to their academy. I was like, oh my goodness, is this it? And once I picked it up and found out that's who it was, it was just, I almost had to sit there for a little bit in my car just to kind of gather myself up, because I was so excited to finally get into policing. My parents were still here. I was up there by myself, and I would just nonstop. Every chance I would come back to Bowling Green and try to see my family and friends. And I knew I always wanted to come back to Bowling Green.
He'll come by and see me here at the office every once in a while. So he came by and he said, I'd like to go to the sheriff's department. And I said, I'll call the sheriff and tell him you're coming. And so he had an interview, and so Vedad got to start participating in the sheriff's program. And
he moved back here primarily because of his family, and so that's who he is. I am confident if they said, hey, you got to move to Los Angeles, California, and you'll be 2,000 miles away from your mom and your dad and your network here, he's not going to do it.
I was super excited. I wanted to work with the Warren County Sheriff's Office, and once I got hired on, it was almost like a dream come true. Seems like this was the place to be, and still is, and I've been here since then.
I was at a gym, and I knew who Vedad was. I knew he worked for the sheriff's office, but I never really interacted with him. And so he was there the same morning and came up to me and just introduced himself, and was really very, very gracious in that he was welcoming and kind. And so for Vedad to come up just sort of on his own and introduce himself, I think just sort of it indicates what kind of person he is. He's a man of courage, but he's got diplomacy intact, and he knew how to interact with somebody who was potentially going to be this unknown in a way that I found really welcoming, and I've never forgotten it.
When Vedad joined the sheriff's department, there was that sense, wow, we are working together now to contribute and make sure that we all get to live better lives together.
Back then and growing up, Vedad was 80% play, 20% work, and that's completely changed around nowadays. Again, he's still got the humor and likes to laugh and cut up, but the man is always working. If he's not working during his regular shift, he picks up extra shifts. So I'll see him at high school basketball, football games, working security. I'll see him working at the mall, again, working security, picking up extra shifts. But Vedad's kind of one of the few I've noticed that actually seeks it out to put in even more time at work. I don't think there would have been somebody else to fill his shoes with what he is doing and to bring, not only has his success affected himself, but I think he's also rubbed off on a lot of people at that sheriff's office as far as kind of widening their perspective on life just by his presence that I don't think would have happened in their lives if he, didn't show up.
Coming here to Warren County, it's my house, and I just want to build it as best as I possibly can. And if that in my career, that means helping out people and trying to make this community the best there is.
And I guess the thing about Vedad that's always been helpful to me is that if I can get Vedad on board with whatever the initiative is, I know it's going to go a long way because he has an influence on everybody. And so when you have a personality like that is on your side, then you're already way down the road of getting it done. Truly with Vedad, I think he's the kind of person that you want to be around.
I'm very proud of where he's gone. It's funny to me to out of all of my friends, he is probably the one personality-wise that probably took the complete turn, and it's I never would have pictured law enforcement. Now he knows there's a lot of people that put a lot of time and effort into him, and we talk about that some, but 15 years ago, he had no idea. He had no idea Steve Ayers was going to be as influential of a person in his life as he's become now.
Yeah, so being a detective, you're going to respond to all kinds of different type of incidents. Some of them are not very pleasant. I never understood when somebody tells me, hey, thank you for your service, because, I was on patrol, I was having fun, I was like, hey, what are they thanking me for here? Like, I really love this job, I don't know what there's for them to thank me for. But being now as a detective, you respond to so many types of different crimes that now I can see, and has in the past affected me, where I had to find routes to either speak to somebody, and just kind of get some of these things off of your chest. And also working out. So, this job comes with its bad, but, it's just a profession that I chose and I'm very proud of.
If you haven't been a detective, it's really hard to understand the responsibility and role that job takes on, because you are knee-deep in it all. The job of a detective it just takes an emotional toll that is hard to really explain if you've never been there.
Now that I'm in this profession, you get to talk and see people out of all aspects and forms of life. So I feel like I'm way more invested in this community than if I wasn't doing this. I just know that Bowling Green and Warren County has been my home, and I feel like now this is my way to say thank you for everything that you have done for me and all the people and immigrants that you welcomed here. And this is just a small little portion of saying thank you by helping out, trying to make this community a better place.
I think in some small way, their high school years of growing up on a football team and in a diverse high school has taught them to get along with others no matter where they find themselves on the globe. Vedad, he embodies that. And he's excited about Warren County. Vedad is a Warren Countian who is Bosnian. And so he really lives out the American dream. You know, Vedad didn't expect Warren County to be Bosnian. He learned how to be a Bosnian in Warren County, and he deeply contributes to the life and the community here in Warren County.
I mean, I think it really reflects a strength of a people who have gone through so much, who have left their native land, who have left behind family and friends, and who have adapted rather quickly and enriched our society so much. And when we talk about immigrants, many times people don't appreciate all of the struggles that immigrants have to go through. And so it is really remarkable, in the span of a couple decades, people can go from an Eastern European country which is communist to living through a terrible war, and then coming here, learning the language, adapting, building businesses, raising their families, and bettering our community. And that's not something that most people can do. That's something which is really special, and we should look at that as a sign of not only of the greatness of the human spirit, but also of the greatness of the opportunities that the United States provides.
I know Warren County is always going to be home. What future holds, I don't know, but I can reassure you that Warren County, and this is where I would love to live till my last breath.